Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you about the latest from Zornheim, the Zornheim Sleep Experiment, on October 22nd on Noble Demon. This album has 10 tracks, 37 minutes in length, and this is the band's second full-length studio album. They are a Swedish extreme symphonic metal band. Now, this album is a concept record, it's a theme album. It goes back into the asylum where we were in the previous record, so from that perspective there's a sense of continuity from album to album. As far as structure goes, the album is super balanced, super cohesive. What you get at the beginning is what you're going to get all the way through. It doesn't dilute itself, it doesn't lose within itself quality as it progresses. It stays very concentrated, it stays very compact. It's 37 minutes, so there's no wiggle room. It has to stay connected with the listener from top to bottom. It has to take the listener on this journey and allow the listener to experience everything that this album has to give in this short period of time, so it stays very connected from that perspective. Within this structure, there are some positives and there are some negatives. The positives is that the majority of the songs work within the concept of the album and they work within their individual selves. What I mean by this is that if you're listening to them on Spotify or on playlists, the songs have the strength to work as an individual song. You can understand what the track is all about, you can see it, you can feel it, you can experience it. And then if you listen to the album in sequence from beginning to end, you're going to feel the same way about these tracks. They work well within the confines of the album. The exceptions are two songs that have their intros broken apart from it and created a different track, almost like an interlude. I didn't see the added value in doing this. The only thing that it's doing is it expanding the track listing. So instead of 10 songs, perhaps you could have had 8 songs. But outside of that, I really don't see the point in doing it, because if you're listening to the album from beginning to end, those tracks become part of the song that comes after. They become part of a much larger picture. And if you're listening to the album on Spotify or playlists and you don't get that intro, the song does feel a little bit naked. It feels like it lost a little bit of something. So I don't understand the decision to break these tracks and create, like I said, an intro or an interlude. I just don't feel it. I don't think it adds value. It doesn't hurt the album if you're going from beginning to end, but it doesn't add value either. So I would have preferred to have those songs compact together and not necessarily break them apart in order to create these smaller pieces of a much larger picture. As far as Soundscape goes, this is a very rich album. There's a lot of layers. You have string quartet, you have real choirs with real people singing, and all of these elements coming together really makes this album super special. It has this Victorian cinematic vibe from the first song all the way through. It never really loses that feel. It's an album that has a large footprint as far as sound is concerned. You feel all the layers, you can see everything that is happening, but there's so many layers that you only see what they want you to see. There's a lot of things that's going to go missing because they're so well hidden or so well woven into the overall fabric of sound that this record has. It has magnificent experience, really well produced, really well put together. It just feels larger and larger, almost with the passing of each and every single song. It has a sense of growth, it has a sense of movement, really clear, really well defined, and with all the elements taking you on the same journey towards the same endpoint on every single track. Now the doses or the amounts, the formulas if you will, from song to song will vary, but the way they come together as one in order to unify the experience, that stays true throughout the entire record. You're going to see that in the symphonic elements that really become the blanket that covers this record, and they permeate across every single piece of this album. They are almost like weeds. They grow roots and they attach themselves to everything. The symphonic orchestrations attach themselves into the atmosphere, into the soundscape, into what the drums are doing, into what the guitars are doing, into what the vocals are doing. They just become a living, breathing organism within the album itself. And that becomes a little bit of the driving force, not just of the sound, not just of the experience, but the atmosphere that creates. That Victorian atmosphere really comes across in the orchestrations that they put together on this album. The drums are heavy at times and a little bit more subdued at others. They don't have a one-size-fits-all throughout the record. They don't even have a one-size-fits-all throughout a single song, so they're very diverse from that perspective. But I always felt like the drums packed enough power, enough strength to ground the album, to give a little bit of a sense of balance, to give a little bit of a sense of having a footprint in which the album can travel on, which is really important for a record that has also that more cinematic, symphonic orchestration side that levitates the record, that brings it up. You need something that brings it back down to earth and grounds it a little bit, and the drums did that regardless if they offer more strength, if they were heavier, or if they jumped a little bit more into the background with their diversity. The guitars are phenomenal on this record. I really enjoy the guitar sound. I really enjoy the guitar drive. I always felt like while the orchestrations were creating this atmosphere that blanket my experience, the way I traveled within the songs was by holding on to the guitars and what they were doing. Chunky at times, very melodic, very driven. The solos on this album are also very interesting because they don't necessarily come over the top and become something that they don't need to be. They almost pair up with the essence of the tracks and what the songs are doing and the melody that the songs already have, and then the solos kind of catch off of that and they feed off of that experience and they become a little bit of an extension of what the tracks were already up until that point. So I really like the design and execution surrounding the solos on the record. Vocally, the album has a lot to offer. You have clean vocals, you have harsh vocals, you have the choirs. All of them are intertwined throughout this experience. You're going to get them from beginning to end, spread out almost evenly throughout this album. I like that because it doesn't feel that it's top heavy on one end and diluted on the other. It just feels very balanced from that perspective. And I really like the symbiosis between the harsher vocals and the cleaner vocals. It almost feels like a Jekyll and Hyde sort of experience as you go down the line. Every single song, there's more of a sense of a character coming to life or an element coming to life just by having the dynamics of having two different styles, two different approaches working off of each other in prol of the song itself. So really interesting aspect. Obviously the choirs, they add to the cinematic vibe. They make the songs feel bigger. They make the songs feel larger. And that's also an important element of the album itself. Overall, this is a very interesting record. Don't let the title of the album fool you. Don't sleep on this record. If you're a fan of symphonic, extreme metal, death metal, black metal, this album is definitely going to be for you. The storytelling aspect of the album is really interesting, but the cinematic presence that the Soundscape creates, to me, that is really what levitates this record. The vocals help push the stories. The vocals help paint a picture, create a frame for you with the cleans, harsh, and choirs, but the symphonic elements, the quality of sound, and what the guitars are doing throughout, balancing out by how well crafted the drums are, really becomes the substance of this record. It really becomes the calling card of this album, an album that's very well done from top all the way to the bottom. Now, as far as favorite tracks are concerned, I want to start off with Corpus Vile, the opening track on the record, and a track that works really well because it gets you to where you need to go right away. There's no intro, there's no leading up. I wouldn't have minded that because for an album of a concept and an album that has a theme, having a little bit of an intro wouldn't have been a bad thing, but at the same time, getting right on to the song and getting right on into the track itself, it was really interesting because there was no room to wiggle. You were just right into it from the time you press play. A song that also has elements that you're going to see throughout the rest of the album. I always feel like that's super important, specifically when you're talking about concept records, to have an opening song that gives you a little bit of a synopsis of what's going to come down the line. And this track definitely does that. It's packed with a lot of elements. It has choirs. The orchestrations give that Victorian cinematic vibe, and you're going to see it in this song, and then you're going to see it permeating throughout the entire album. The blend of harsh and clean vocals is super hooky. It really hooks you to the track, and it really hooks you overall to the album. The symbiosis of the two, the way they interact with one another, is magnificent throughout this song and throughout the record itself. It's a massive track. It has tons of layers, both musically and vocally. I honestly don't feel like you can see all of them or feel or hear all of them because there's just so many pieces moving and so many things coming at you. It's really hard to adjust to it. The guitar solo blends with the overall sonic atmosphere of the track. This is something that's going to become very constant throughout this album, and I really enjoy it because it didn't break the record, it didn't feel different, it didn't feel out of place. It just kind of brought into the forefront the melody that was already there, and it just put it on a pedestal for everybody to enjoy for a period of time, making it more noticeable for the second time that you go through the album. So this track has that, and it's going to become a staple down the line. The rest of the song starts to grow after that solo. You start to grow. The song starts to move. At the end, there's a blend of a church organ that really brings this sinister vibe to a song that overall is very, very sinister to begin with. But that closing touch, in my opinion, and not being over the top, it was just blended in with the overall soundscape, was a magnificent way of finishing this track. Next, you have Dead Silence, a heavier track but still very dynamic with ups and downs. It relies on the orchestration to create the atmosphere. but it doesn't lose itself within itself. It's a track that stays very grounded, that stays very connected. It's not linear, it's very dynamic, but it always feels like it's taking you forward and not necessarily allowing you to just enjoy the scenery. So it's very direct from that point of view. It always pushes the listener forward, like I said. It relies on the clean and harsh vocals to help the story. This is where you start to see a song like this, is where you start to see that dynamic of the story coming to life, that Jekyll and Hyde perspective, the definition of the characters by using two styles of vocals really comes to life. It has a very positive impact, not just in the sound and the experience, but the atmosphere that the orchestrations are creating as well. The chorus slows down the track, and because it slows down, it almost feels, the way it comes across, super macabre, like a macabre valse. That's how it feels. It feels like it's dancing around very slowly, very dark, very ominous, and it's a reset for what comes before and what comes after, because the verses are more direct, the verses are heavier. So this creates ebbs and flows, creates peaks and valleys, and it makes the song super interesting and super dynamic. Last but not least, Black 9, a more direct track. When you look at the two previous ones, that there's so many layers, ups and downs, changes between verses and chorus, clean vocals, harsh vocals, the way they interact with one another. Then you have a song like Black 9 where it feels a little bit more flat, it feels a little bit more constrained, it feels a little bit more linear, if you will. It still has great orchestrations. The guitars still drive the melody and they drive the experience. The drums feel a little bit more powerful. They ground this song slightly better. They have more of a predominant role in terms of how this song feels and how it comes across. But overall, it doesn't lose itself, or it doesn't lose itself within itself. It doesn't have a lot for the listener to dive deep into it. There's not a lot for the listener to digest, and there's not a lot of layers to peel. So this is an easier track to process. It's an easier track to go through. It almost feels a little bit like of a reprieve, considering everything that came before and what comes after. This is it. This is Zornheim with the Zornheim Sleep Experiment, out October 22nd on Noble Demon. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.